Hello everybody, welcome back to the Studio Scoria channel. My name is Mazarym, and today we're going to be covering the Daltonian Calendar. What is it? Where does it come from? Even the names of the gods and the holidays that are associated. Brief history. So the Daltonian Calendar is the international calendar of the world of Scoria, as ordained by the Scoria United Nations, also known as the Sun. The Sun has slightly more governing power than, say, our real UN, or at the very least, the means to enforce its mandates. So when the Sun was formed some 80 years ago, shortly after the Second World War, the first session of the General Assembly moved to adopt an international calendar in order to keep timekeeping and dating internationally consistent, without the means of converting each date from numerous calendars already in use across the world. And so to make a long story short, fortunately for them, the General Assembly agreed on the creation of a calendar where year zero marked the end of Catherine Dalton's expedition. So now you might be wondering, who is Captain Dalton? Captain Catherine Dalton and her crew of the Lincoln Empire, among, if not the largest empire in existence, were among the first people to successfully circumnavigate the world. And so year zero on the Daltonian calendar equates to 1408 AD. So there isn't really a term for our actual year, the Gregorian calendar. We're going to call it the Old Theos' calendar. So in other words, 615 years since the Daltonian expedition is the current year in Scoria, which roughly equates to 2023 AD. So a year from now, actually, which is kind of funny to think about. The whole thing with Scoria is it's meant to be like a sort of, I guess, near future alternate world. So let's go to the basics of the calendar. So the Daltonian calendar is divided up into 13 months and 28 days each. It's also based on the International Fixed Calendar, which operates under these same circumstances. This is a real calendar that was proposed sometime, I want to say, in the 50s. And the last month of the year has 29 days, equaling 365. And there's also a leap year before years, much like with the Gregorian calendar or the Old Theos' calendar, as we discussed. And this extra day falls under the month of Causus. And you might be wondering, what are the months of the Daltonian calendar? I mentioned gods briefly, and so with the international calendar, the months are named after the reign of gods. These were among the most influential ancient pantheon, spreading across Talmere, Valscoria, Balsamaria, and even northern Laboca. So there's so many different cultures that have many names for basically the same group of people. And we're going to be going over the more common names for them because that's also the names of the months. So there you go. First up, the month of Anam. Anam is the goddess of life and new beginnings, often depicted as a shepherd due to her patronage over living things. She's also the consort to Tempor, who is the king of the gods. We'll get to him in a second. Probably the most common holidays that fall under the month of Anam would be New Year's for starts, Anam first, but you can see here with how the calendar is set up and formatted, you can tell what month of or days of the Gregorian calendar these days would fall under. So yeah, New Year's first of Anam, and then Scoria Day, which is kind of like Earth Day, falls under the 21st, near the end. The next month, Secundina. Secundina is the goddess of love and fertility. She's also the consort to Sudras, who we'll get to as well. There are going to be multiple gods that are married or in league with each other, but not all of them are represented in the calendar. So probably the more notable holidays that fall under Secundina would be President's Day in Niteria, which falls under the 17th. So right here. President's Day Niteria started out as a celebration of the birth of Damien Clarkos, who I believe, if I'm getting my Nitirian history correct, was, I think, the first president. So there you go. The first president, his birthday, President's Day Niteria. And funny enough, earlier in that week, or actually earlier in the previous week, in Valmora, is King's Day. Kind of funny how that contrasts itself. King's Day, President's Day. King's Day is celebrated on the 12th of Secundina, and it commemorates the current royal family, the Atsuri de Moor's triumph in conquering Vorduin. So in the War of Velmorn Succession, a prince from the West Kingdom, the Oberkrenia is what it's called, led the armies with the help of the Malinkans to take over the East Kingdom. And his family is the current ruling family. That's King's Day. And that's Secundina. Next month, Tempor. We talked about Tempor when we introduced Anam. Tempor is the god of time, and he's considered the king of the Hellenic pantheon. Depicted with a big flowing beard and a rod of power, with an orb that kind of represents and exemplifies the total passage of time, all within his fingertips. It's kind of interesting. So notable holidays that fall into the month of Tempor would be on the 8th is International Women's Day, right here. And also Ancestors' Day is a very important holiday celebrating Casavea on the 14th. Marnus. You can kind of already tell what he represents based on his looks. But yeah, Marnus is the god of the sea. It is also the consort to Sirator, who we will also discuss as one of the Hellenic gods who has a month named after them. Holidays in Marnus. Marnus Day, which depending on where you live, could be on the 1st or the 2nd. Marnus Day is more like a spring folk festival, kind of coming out of the bitter coldness of winter and into spring and all of its beauty. And also, on the end of Marnus, the 28th, is when they celebrate the Nigerian Revolution. That's Nigerian Revolutionary Day, Marnus the 28th. Sudras. Sudras is the god of fire, the god of artisans, volcanoes, and is the consort to the goddess Mora. Mora, unfortunately, is one of those goddesses that's not mentioned here or is on the calendar, but Mora was the goddess of the hearth and the state. Sudras is also here's a meta trivia for you. Sudras is also the newest addition to the Hellenic pantheon. We renamed a god recently, and instead had Sudras replace him, seeing him as a more cooler and more fitting, internationally recognizable figure. Holidays that fall under Sudras are Workers' and Laborers' Day, which is actually the first of Sudras. And also, on the 9th of Sudras, the Victory Day of World War II is celebrated. V-Day is celebrated on the 9th of Sudras. Let us get into the next month, which is Kausus. Kausus is considered the herald of the gods and is the god of fortune. You can see here he's depicted blind because fortune, shall we say, like luck, is right in them at best, but there was still a lot of people that believed if they prayed to Kausus, they would be blessed with good luck and good fortune. A lot of holidays that fall under the month of Kausus, actually. The first of Kausus is actually Children's Day, celebrated internationally. And on the 20th and the 23rd, respectively, are Good Vade and Theo Ipsa. These are very important holidays in the Theosist religion that commemorate the death and resurrection of Yeshua Theos, who is the central figure. We may do a Worldbuilding Wednesday when we cover major religions. That'll definitely be near the top of the list for sure. And also on the 20th, funny enough, is Midsummer, which is more celebrated in Talmere as the beginning of the summer season. Very popular, very fun folk festival. Next, the month of Sirator. Sirator is the goddess of astral bodies. Her children are actually considered to be the gods of the sun, moon, and stars, respectively. We mentioned that she was the consort to Marnus when we talked about Marnus. We'll talk more about the more lesser and other mythological figures, perhaps another time. But a lot of holidays as well under Sirator. Starting with on the 3rd is Warriors' Day, which actually commemorates the loss of lives in the Labokan War, namely for the natives that fought against colonial armies that were invading, taking advantage of the situation during the Labokan War in the 480s, I believe. Next we have on the 8th is Memorial Day in Valmora. Memorial Day in Valmora commemorates the victory over the Fatez Sultanate in Scoria during, I believe it was the second Valmoran-Valtez War and the Battle of Armosla. And also, another important religious holiday on the 24th through the 27th is Bamala, which celebrated by the Qasims, those who follow the Lahada religion, commemorates the first revelation of God revealed to Mohem by Laha. Laha is the name of God in the Lahada faith. That's Sirator, month of Sirator. Next we have Viator. Viator was the Hellenic god of war, representing the spirit of battle, but unfortunately, despite how cool he might look, he actually wasn't that popular or like well worshipped, I guess you could say. Viator was more associated with the savagery and the brutality of warfare, unlike his consort and counterpart Gelu, who we will talk about in this list. Notable holidays in the month of Viator. There's only really one right now, and it's the 17th of Viator, which is Valmoran Unification, also known as Valmora Day. Valmoran Unification commemorates the annexation of the island of Andoa in the northeast of the island nation, which fully unified the Valmoran region and is sometimes considered the traditional formation of the Valmoran Empire. Mesis, the month of Mesis. Mesis is the goddess of the harvest and often associated with nature. A lot of holidays here as well. So we have, for starters, VT Day. So unlike V Day, which was celebrated in Sudras, VT Day is Victory in Talmere Day. Same war, but more associated with this specific region and the theater of the war. That's celebrated on the 2nd of Mesis. Another holiday is Kirodam, which is an Andoan holiday celebrated on the 16th. The Andoan religion is a minor native religion that sprang out of the Hellenic pantheon, but commemorates the death of their prophet Andos, who is indicative of the name of the religion. And lastly, on the 22nd of Mesis, the festival of Vamas is celebrated. Vamas is a traditional wisdom holiday, also known as the Triumph of Blood, but so little is known about Wisdo, it's unclear whether this is a separate instance or perhaps could pertain to wisdom independence from the Guacan Empire. Next month, Tenebris. Tenebris is the god of death, and depending on which mythology you might be studying, according to the Maramic pantheon, Tenebris was the king of the underworld. According to the Vescorians, he was more of just like a figure associated with the underworld, and it's kind of unclear depending on who you would ask in ancient times. For all intents and purposes, associated with death. And perhaps the most famous holiday in the month of Tenebris, the 28th no less, is Ancestors' Eve, also known as Totem Tag, also known as Shamazi Day, and that is essentially Scorian Halloween. So there you go. Next, we have Bulbus. Bulbus was the god of frenzy, the god of wine, the god of ecstasy. A couple holidays in Bulbus. Perhaps the most famous is actually Bulbus Fest. This is celebrated all month long, originating in central Talmere. Bulbus Fest is just a celebration of drinking and being merry, and quite frankly, a lot of people do like to do those things. So you can imagine how popular this holiday spread across the world. Also celebrated in Bulbus on the 19th is International Men's Day, and shortly thereafter, in the Theosist world, on the 20th is the Feast of Saint Francos, also known as Franksgiving. Now we have the month of Gelu. Gelu is also a goddess of war, but more associated with the organization thereof, so like your generals and your rank and file soldiers, the honor of combat, and also the goddess of wisdom, which definitely made her more popular than her counterpart Viator. A couple holidays in Gelu include All Saints' Day and the 7th, which is a very important holiday in the Orthodox Theosist world. On the 15th from the 17th in Verenum is Faltum Dies, which marks the Vedian triumph over the Faltes in the region of Luboka. And last but certainly not least is Vir. Vir is considered the god of man and the god of justice. He came in notably later than the other gods we previously mentioned, perhaps closer to the founding of Theosism and Lenkoru than the formation of the Hellenic pantheon. Vir is sort of a Promethean figure that became the chiefly worshipped god. He triumphed over the Hellenic gods after helping mankind, and eventually breaks free of his chains during the Cosmore. When we talk more about the Hellenic gods sometime in the near future, the Cosmore was sort of your apocalypse, your Ragnarok, that really just turned everything upside down for the Hellenic gods. A couple holidays in the month of Vir include Piers Day, also known in Talmere as Krumplanschlag, the 24th, and that was the worship or commemoration of an ancient Talmari god, sort of like Krampus, I guess you could say. So like a god of mischief. And perhaps one of the most celebrated holidays in the world, the 25th of Vir commemorates the Theogenesy, also known as the Yuletide or Winter Feast. Basically Scorian Christmas. So for the Theosis, it's the birth of Yeshua Theos, who was Vir in the flesh, shall we say. But for many people, including especially non-Theosis nations, it's just a time of gift giving and, getting together and making merry, all around a good, wholesome time. And you might be wondering, how do you find the Common Era year? Or how do you find the Daltonian year from, say, the Gregorian calendar? And these are the formulas you do. You would essentially plug this in. So remembering that 1408 AD equals 0 DE. And these are examples of adding and subtracting different years to try to find the Common Era or Gregorian year. And to do the opposite, very similar. Instead, you would just subtract the Common Era or Gregorian year from the Daltonian year 0, which is 1408 AD, and then get those years. Boom. That's all I have for you in the Daltonian calendar. If you have any questions or comments or concerns, please feel free to leave them down in the comments. If you'd like to see these live, you can watch me at twitch.tv/Mazarym. But thank you so much for watching. Sorry if it was a little sloppy, I know. Kind of my first time going through this, but really hope you liked it and hope to see you in the next one.